Uh,
Troy,
hey Corey.
how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Pretty good.
Let's see. I think I'm good here.
I think you're good. I can hear you. I can see you.
Oh, hang on. I got my computer's doing weird things.
They're prone to that.
Oh, yes. So if I do this. Okay.
All right.
Is there like on the notes I have here, we got like yeah, trying to put like articulate what we're doing with this breeding initiative.
Yeah. You want to start there, or do you want to kind of tell folks how things are looking in your world, in your
Yeah, as I
apiary?
say, yeah, what are we doing in our apiaries or how are things going? Um,
Then we can go into our master plan.
some sort of yeah, what we can conjure up. Yep.
Sounds good. So, what are things looking like in Troy's apiaries right now?
Um, it's busy. There's a lot of like we're phasing out of queen rearing. That's officially kind of like we've actually done raising queens, but just like getting all the nucleus colonies situated, where they're fed, they're everything's healthy, addressing any of the nukes that might have been, rejected queens. So we're trying to get everything productive. Um, and beginning the process of harvesting honey. I just pulled off the first load or the first pull in a sense, just on Thursday and Friday. So we'll be extracting tomorrow. It's going to rain here tomorrow, so it's a good day to extract.
Oh
So
yeah.
doing that. Um, yeah, it's as we take the honey off every year, I'm always, kind of like I feel every year like it's just the whole operation sometimes, at least in the honey production yards. It's like, is this whole thing gonna just tip over and burn and crash and burn in a way? Because we haven't treated I haven't treated my honey production colonies, most of them actually, uh have not been treated, you know, and some of them were treated last year with one dose of formic, the 14-day treatment of formic. But other than that, these colonies are completely, kind of feral in a sense when it comes to treatments. So I'm always since the collapse of my apiary a few years ago, I always feel kind of a little vulnerable this time of year. Not sure, what's the best, how do I want to tackle this year? And it's amazing to me how every year it changes with what's going on with bees and mites. Like this year, it's clear that the mite threshold is higher in my colonies as we take honey off. Not, I'm not seeing like deformed wing virus expressed with deformed wings, but we're seeing some colonies that have just, kind of high. I don't know. It's not really even PMS. It's just you have hygienic bees, but you can tell that they're not suppressing mite reproduction enough. So they're pulling out pupa, they're doing all this stuff, but they're just not, it's not, you can tell that I don't know how to articulate this. The equilibrium is not balanced in the bee's favor.
Yep.
So I don't know if have you seen that before, Corey? Like,
Oh
have you?
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And I think also like this is the absolute worst time of the year, right? In this time period that we're in. So I was just going through some of mine, and like usually hive beetles aren't an issue, but
Mhm.
I had a couple small nukes that got overrun. Like they had brood and everything in there, and they were eating the brood.
Oh, wow. The
Bees
beetles
didn't know
were?
what to do. Yeah, exactly. It was
Wow.
crazy. It looked like a little swarm. Like I saw one light on the side of a large production colony. And I'm like, well, that's weird. And so they were just basically absconding or getting forced out.
Wow. The beetles are taking over that bad.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just looking at a couple colonies and I think, oh my gosh, same thing. Is it all coming apart? But
Yeah.
they're under like the most stress right now. Like coming out of summertime, I don't know what it is about that heat, but it seems like something always goes queenless, something
Yep.
always, I think it's just stressful on them like us. If we're out working in that extreme heat, it's
Yeah.
just stressful. And so, yeah, I mean, I know what you're talking about. And I think that we're looking at the worst of it right now, and that your inclination as someone responsible for the management is like, is it all coming apart? Is it going to unravel here? But
Yeah.
I think it'll get better here pretty quick as soon as they kind of knock off brood rearing and stuff. If they've got plenty of stores, hopefully they don't have extensive damage. If you're not seeing, PMS or at least withered wing to a high
Yeah.
degree.
Exactly. And that's kind of the big thing that I always try to, people ask me, well, how do you know, when to withhold treatment and when to apply it? And, obviously without just, I'm not going to do washes. I haven't really done any washes, and I don't have the time to either. So I'm just kind of looking at the brood. And then, yeah, like you just said, like if there's an active, like it's PMS, there's a way that like if you have a generation of brood that just emerged, and in that generation that's literally emerging before you, you see dead bee, like a dead bee that was just emerging and then just died, right then and there. Like
Not good.
that's not good.
Yeah.
um and yeah, you see a lot. I mean, that's kind of the stuff I'm looking for, is what's the cat brood look like right after it's pupating. So if you have like hygienic behavior taking place, any issues like during the larval stage, obviously they're cleaning up things there. And then what's it looking like, post purple-eyed stage, that when the bees are able to detect, or when you have like the mite that's done, like in that phase of like when you do a harbor assay, it's that phase where if she's going to produce, that mite in a sense going to produce, it's going to happen by this time. So if you can look at that phase of the brood that's about like 4 to 5 days before they emerge, somewhere in that window, like what's that population of brood look like in the colony. So there's
Yeah.
all these different like there's all these time signatures or time stamps on brood that I just kind of quickly look at. And if it's like you eggs, larvae look good, adult bees look good, just like in the immediate kind of like nurse population. And what's the emerging bees look like? What's that brood look like just ready to emerge? If everything's kind of like line synced up and looks healthy, then it's like, yeah, these guys are doing it. They're running on their own. And that we slate those. Like I'll flag that for like, okay, let's see if we can get it back and harbo this one.
Yep.
Um, and see, if there's any correlation there. And then obviously the ones that are showing stress. And that's what I'm seeing right now, is not every colony, but there's just a handful that I've been in. And it's like, yeah, these guys they're gonna need some formic if they're gonna make it into October.
Yep.
Otherwise they're just gonna be compromised at this point.
Yep. Exactly. So what do you think, or what's your game plan? Are you gonna just like target the ones that start to look a little off, or do you just like, are there certain yards you just hit, or
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a it's so it's a hard decision, right? Because when you're running numbers, you just can't isolate like I'd want to often. And then there's times where it's like, we just don't, at the end of the season, when we're at the end of the, well, no, we're just finishing pulling the honey, it's getting into September. Like I don't have time to fuss around anymore. The crop's got to get
yeah,
off. We got to feed if we need to feed. So at that point, it's just like if I can kind of feel like I lose that ability to play the game of like, let's not treat, let's treat. And it's almost like we show up and it's like you pull the honey and you just treat them all. That's
yeah,
kind of like that's like what it feels like would be the most economical thing to do when you
yeah,
got numbers of colonies. But even then I still try to poke into most of them and just see who's doing what. Because I mean, it's for me, it's being able to tell, I can identify family lines right then and there, all the breeder queens, all the daughters from last year, and you can see like how they're all really pulling their weight,
right.
as someone who's kind of trying to keep a finger or a pulse on all the families in the apiary, especially at this time when you said it's like make or break time for
Mhm.
what they can do.
Yep, exactly. And then there's always that, desire, which I don't think anybody loves to put miticides on their colonies, but like, it's that risk versus reward. Like, can I just not use it? And you know how that works out. It can
Mhm.
not be great, so man, this is going to be the case until like we actually come up with something that's extremely mite resistant and it's the majority of what people are running. you know,
Mhm.
until then, I think this is going to be constant, like every year, like do I? And I think that's
And
why most people just hit everything because there's so much less thinking and washing and evaluation involved, especially if you're just a honey production or you
mhm.
use a lot of beehives in the spring to make nukes. Like the go-to is like clean them up as much as you can.
Yep.
I think like but that's the balance. Like if we start breeding, like where we're looking at, how well are they handling it? That opens up a whole nother. That's the reason I, was not putting treatments on in the first place. But and beekeepers go round and round and round and round and round over that.
Mhm.
I don't know. But with that being said, we are selecting and breeding for stuff that has known measurable resistance. And I don't think it's difficult for one person to do that. And so we've we've envisioned an initiative. We don't necessarily have a name for it other than the basis of our selection is predominantly SMR, or the bee's ability to suppress mite reproduction. They still get mites, but they're able to drastically curb um, the mite's ability to reproduce. And
Mhm.
I think then we can start to get into articulate like what we're up to here, what our plan is. And this is a loose plan. We're kind of figuring it out as we go. Some
Yep.
stuff will work great, some stuff maybe not. We'll have to make adjustments. But the basis of it is we have that loose overarching goal that we're breeding for something that's suppressing mite reproduction that has mite resistance, but we're not so rigid over all these rules that anybody that, like yourself, that values genetics, that's running bees for profit, they need to be productive.
Mhm.
The basic plan is that we're running these bees, letting them work, letting them get stressed, and then we're kind of cherry picking the best, most productive ones. Then we'll test those, and the ones that do the best out of the best, we'll reconcentrate that with breeder queens and then restart the whole process over again.
Mhm.
So you and I are, some people love dark bees, especially folks that live up north where they have substantially worse winters than I do, like Troy. And so, I've worked on I call them Missouri mite hunters, but it's really a lighter colored bee. And so Troy and I are going to start working on a darker line and with VSH or with SMR selection. So some people may say, What's SMR? What's VSH? What's
Mhm.
this foreign language that Cory's speaking?" Well, basically, it's loosely as VSH. Whenever the bee lab first figured it out, they knew that somehow mite reproduction was being suppressed. So that's SMR. And I
Yeah.
think whenever you're measuring VSH, you're technically quantifying SMR, the bee's ability to suppress mite reproduction, but they changed the verbiage to VSH. So if you hear us use SMR, suppress mite reproduction, or VSH, they're technically the same thing. It used to be called SMR, now they call it VSH because they know it's hygiene. But me being trying to be precise on my verbiage, I feel like SMR is technically what we're measuring here.
Mhm.
So that's the basic idea of the program, so to speak. And I've got some other folks, not very many, but that are working with me on the lighter colored strain. And those guys are more almond pollination and north south
Mhm.
migratory to Troy's stationary. The guys up at in Michigan, Sustainable Beekeepers Guild of Michigan, James, Matt, and those guys, they love a darker bee. They're way up north, and so I know they're going to be testing some of this stuff too.
Mhm.
And what's your take on it, or where would you like to see it go?
I first just like the idea of collaborating with you personally. You're a good guy,
Like what?
and you have clearly, from what I know and what I see, um, I think it's worth the efforts to collaborate. And I say this because you think about it, like queen rearing. and in particular to any operation that's serious about queenering, you don't just like flippantly just bring in queens from anybody,
It's a
right? It's
bad
like yeah, you work really hard at maintaining something. And the last thing you want to do is just bring something in for the sake of experimentation and then really just kind of lose whatever, especially if you had a direction that you're aiming for. And I think our direction years ago, before we really even knew each other, but just like you were pursuing your thing, I was pursuing my thing, and we were both kind of coming at it from this idea of how can we keep bees with minimal treatment or no treatment.
Yep.
And we both had our kind of individual understanding, or kind of we both came at that from maybe we came at that with our own kind of, we brought that to the table, right? So we came at that with the ideology of like, how can we keep bees with minimal treatment? And so I envision that collaborating together with someone like you with an expertise with using AI, and obviously I'm doing everything's been open mated for me, but we can kind of collaborate and just divide up, the more hands in the mix here, hopefully it would be some sort of an easier way to more eyes kind of looking at something, more brain power. And it's a delicate dance, right? Because too many cooks in the kitchen, it really can get confusing. So I think there's a balance of like, what's the right amount of manpower, what's the right amount of contribution to make this really effective. And I think we're going to find that out. But working with you and collaborating, I think is just going to help me and help you reach our desired end of like, can we in 5 years from now see a measurable resistance, where it's
Totally.
like, for me it would be, I'm pulling honey off the bees, and year after year for consecutive seasons I'm seeing colonies that are just like not starting to crumble from mite pressure, like
Yep.
or at least where mite pressure is no longer an issue. It
Mhm.
might be some other issues, like, okay, these guys are just a little light on some food, and we gotta feed. But if it's mite related issues that we can start to nip in the bud, especially for me up in this part of the world, when you start pulling honey off and you're starting to see it, like this is the time of the year where mites and bees are gonna, you're gonna find out who's gonna win the battle.
Yep.
But so collaborating to breed for more to maintain those to breed for resistance and to maintain those traits, and to be able to use your expertise for AI, with AI, to be able to, and you would agree with me, not that AI is the sole, it's not going to fix all the problems, but if we can use it as in proportion as like the right tool in the toolbox to say, like, let's cross these, let's see if we can make some crosses, and then the crosses have real good desirable outcome, then I think that's what's needed.
Totally. And when Troy says AI, we're talking about artificial insemination, just to where we can control the drone side of mating, which is a massive advantage. But also, too, like the way that we're approaching it with minimal treatment, we're not like, I feel like we're letting Mother Nature have a say. To
Mhm.
whereas if you clean up the mites constantly, all the time, you're constantly at that, your bees are clean, and it's good for honey production and keeping that stress level low, but it's quite difficult whenever you're trying to breed. If you're actually trying to select for something, you've masked it to where you
Yep.
can't even see it. So that minimal approach, or testing before you treat, like, okay, well, these are the ones that we want to reproduce, and then clean
Mhm.
your bees up. You can kind of get the best of both worlds. Where on this end, Troy sent me some stock to test and to play with, and we're already getting good results. So it's, I know you said 5 years. I always look at things worst case scenario too, but I honestly think 5 years we're going to be balling by then, because I think we already know what to start with.
Mm.
We can measure it, and that hasn't been a thing for a long time. Like,
No.
that's why I stopped treating, because I couldn't measure it. I didn't know how to measure VSH. Nobody did, unless you were in the inner circle at the B lab. I feel like I was not in
Mhm.
the inner circle there. And so the only thing I knew to do was just let Mother Nature punch him around and see who starts to fold. And then whoever doesn't, they've got something. What is it? We have no idea, but they have something. and then go from there. Where now, after John Harbaugh released to his breeding group, like how to measure SMR and measure VSH, we're not feeling around quite so blindly. I feel
Mhm.
like we can take accurate measurements and see exactly what's going on. A root cause analysis. So we're not just alcohol washing. Like, do they have mites? Do they not have mites?
Mhm.
We're going into the brood to look and see if they're allowing mite reproduction. Because if
Yep.
they are not, obviously, if your mites aren't reproducing, your mite load should be lower on average. Again, it
Yep.
does not mean that you're not going to have mites, because if you've got another yard close or a colony that's ate up with it and they start to fold, these bees they're stronger. We know how this works.
Oh yeah.
We're just going to go take it from that dude that's on his last leg, and then
Yep.
they're going to bring all those home. So that's why I don't think that alcohol wash, that's not going to be our primary selection criteria. We'll probably take some washes just to get data, but we're focused on SMR VSH. And just controlling mite growth is great, but I also feel like you get inadvertent massive wins with a hygienic bee like that too, because I think they target Varroa reproduction, but
Mm.
they're also targeting just sick brood. Like, you're
Yep.
not going to see chalk brood. And I really think that they can detect if there's a pupa that's ate up with deformed wing virus. I think that's why you don't see it in my apiaries that haven't been treated, is because I think they throw that pupa out
Mm.
before. We know what they do whenever they hatch. What do nurse bees do? They go around and feed everybody. So if they hatch and they're sick, they go around and make everyone else sick too. So this is something that's really cool about this trait. And we'll get more viral load data on this as we progress.
Mhm.
We'll start off smaller, just picking the cream of the crop. And you talk about my skills as a breeder with artificial insemination. That is true, but that alone is not adequate. You really need to run a large sample size, and you need to run them like Troy is in it to make honey. If he doesn't make honey, it's hard to keep the lights on.
Yep.
We want something that's productive too. So I just feel like collaboratively, we can utilize expertise of instrumental insemination, but then that vital piece with all that work involved and investment of running all these colonies and maintaining them, your sample size is just larger and larger whenever you can collaborate.
Yep.
So, I mean,
And
you've got a
that's
massive contribution just by running sample size and running them, in a productive environment.
yeah. No, and I to echo on that, just the being able to have that bigger selection pool of selection, the number with what you're doing and with a few other beekeepers who are in the mix with this. It's crucial to get that broad selection and then kind of focus on who's really pulling the weight in that general population. Um, yeah. So.
Totally. And like with the other guys, I mentioned, the Missouri Mite Hunter line that I've been working on for a while. It's a lighter, more of an Italianish looking bee, and they just keep large brood nests, which may not be ideal if you're Ian Stepler in Canada or you're
Yeah.
Troy, where you're at in New Hampshire. It's maybe not ideal. They maybe use a bit too much stores. But if you're looking for pollination, because you get judged early in the year on how many frames of bees you have. If you have these larger clusters, you have more bees that make an 8 frame average. That's
Mm.
in the bank. You have larger colonies if you're trying to split or make splits or nucleus colonies for sale. Those big brood nests are nice, especially if you're in
Mhm.
southern Florida or, to where they're larger earlier.
Yep.
Uh, I feel like they are productive. They probably use more stores to get built up, but it's a pretty good setup commercially,
Yep.
and they're running them to almonds, so they're getting stressed out. I got that idea from the USDA Bee Lab. Their
Mm.
Paul lines that they ran forever. They they still have them, but I haven't used them in a while. The last ones I had were, I may have had some Adams from VP years ago, but mainly the Paul lines I ran were from Tom Glenn,
Mm.
and they were really hard to kill. And they were commercially productive too. So we're just kind of following that model. of what the USDA really did an excellent job on,
Mm,
and try to take it to the private field. So, at this point, we're not grant funded. It's just we're obsessed and we
yep,
want to make a difference and we want to do something. So that's our fuel behind it. We're already set up. We're beekeepers. So why not?
yep. I think that that's you touched on a point, the fact that this isn't kind of something that's coming together because of some um it's grassroots kind of, that's the way, I guess, the best way to describe it. We don't have a big grant behind us. We don't have a big uh it's just like you said, just it's like-minded beekeepers that are coming together to see if we can contribute towards helping solve some of the current problems and issues that the industry is facing,
Yep,
and being able
exactly.
to see if we can make some break or some kind of avenues in with with stock management, with being able to really see if we can collaborate to get better bees that are able to deal with mites.
Yep.
Um, and seeing, my idea is like, if or one way I kind of envision this is, if you're using 6 treatments in a season, or even 8, I don't know. I mean, what I live in a vacuum up here, but if you're running bees migratory, you got, they're constantly being pushed to perform and to keep revenue coming in. But if you're using a lot of treatments, and the biggest thing that I'd like to see is that you can start to say, like, we're using 6 treatments in a season, and now we brought in this stock from whatever this initiative we're doing, and we clearly see in a season's, after getting, that the queens to go, and the genetics of the queens kind of disperse to the colonies, you can start to see a transition and start to say, we went from 6 to 2, or 6 to 3, or some
Yep.
measurable use where it's like, we don't need to treat like we used to.
Exactly.
That would be the real, for me, that would take the mystery out of, is this possible? Because I'm still always a skeptic. I
Yeah.
believe in it, but I'm always like very realistic with, like,
Yep.
okay, is this really, is this really possible? And it is possible, but I'd like to be, for me to really say it is happening, is to start to see people that were completely just like, we don't care about trying to breed, we just want something that works, right? And then you can introduce this stock into that population of or that mindset of like, just give me something that works, and they're like, oh wow, we don't have to use this, we don't have to lean on the treatments like we used to.
Yep.
That would be a really good place to be at. And I think that
Absolutely.
yeah.
And that's like if you study IPM or integrated pest management, that's the goal. It's
Yeah.
basically to treat as little as possible, to have intelligent treatments to use whenever you need it, but to treat as little as possible. And really, if your bees have no resistance, which is 90 some odd percent of the bees out there, commercial and feral,
Yeah.
unfortunately, uh, they have zero mite resistance. So if you're not intervening, they may make it for a little while, but they're going to end up folding. Whereas
Yep.
if they have some mechanism themselves, like SMR or VSH, man, they've got an advantage. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have struggles as a beekeeper. There's still pesticides, there's still starvation, there's still beekeeper induced tragedies,
Mm-hmm.
that we have a hand in occasionally. It's still going to be hard. It's just not as hard
Yep.
because you've lowered that. Most people would agree Varroa is probably the numero uno stressor, our biggest mortality of our colonies. The root cause is Varroa. So if we can at least mitigate that, and
Yep.
it's totally doable, everybody wins. And two, the native bees, like a lot of people are starting to hate on honeybees, which is quite annoying because no, they're not invasive. They're a beneficial species. So don't listen to people if they're starting to hate on honeybees. That's some ridiculous propaganda. But also, as beekeepers, we are a part of the natural environment. So we do have responsibilities. And if our bees have lower viruses and lower issues,
Mhm.
there's just less chance of that transfer into the native population. But I don't think it's as big a deal as we make it. But at the same time, we'd just be better stewards all the way around. You know, if we have bees that can handle it themselves. And then, you know, if you get in a bad situation or you have a bad year where your mite pressure is through the roof for whatever reason, well, then you can step in and deal with it, but you're just not leaning on that constantly, which is
Yeah.
always a bad idea because nature always finds a way around it. I mean, look at amatraz.
Yeah.
Amazing miticide.
Yeah.
Amazing. Forever.
Yeah, no, and it's pulled the whole industry for 20 years. I mean, there's been no miticide. Well, we since Varroa. I mean, it's the longest. It's been the longest party, kind of that's been going to keep the whole show going.
Exactly.
So it's amazing that it has held up the way that it has.
It
You
has,
know,
and thankfully we had it this long, but here we go again. That's
yeah,
starting to fold. So now we got to find another one. Then when that one starts to fold, we got to find another one. You know,
yeah.
and if and resistance is the hardest thing to come up with. It's the hard path. But
Well, it's what, and you can say like, well, why is it hard? I mean, and we know why, right? But
yeah,
like in a practical sense, you have to subject a population to failure. I don't know how to describe it. You got to subject. You got to. There's and who's got the who's willing to do that? In their own with their own operation, with their own livestock, in a sense, with their own bees.
mm,
um and there's no right or wrong way, but that's what I've always had to struggle with, is like I am putting myself in a position where I am making a decision to forego treatment, and I mean, I am affecting my bottom line, from the onset. I'm losing
okay,
colonies to
yep,
this, and
yeah,
so, that's the struggle, mentally, physically, and just in a business sense. It's really, to get around that is, I've had to, I still, like right now, like just this, every year we're pulling honey, and I'm always kind of feeling that pressure. What's the right thing to do right now? Okay, I need to, my family we need income.
yeah,
I want to be a beekeeper next year, but at the same time, I don't want to just kind of cave in and do what's easy just for the sake of convenience either. What's the right thing to do from a stewardship perspective, and for the sake of the future of beekeeping. And that's why I feel like, again, I'm kind of circling the wagons and rabbit trailing a little, rabbit holing, but working with someone like you, it's like I don't think this job can be done on one person's shoulders. It
it
needs
can,
to be, I mean, kind of like what Dr. Stephen Martin, when we were
yeah,
talking with him this spring,
I like
the whole country of Cuba, in a sense, had to, just because of economic means, wasn't
that.
capable of treating their beehives. So
Right.
like, this effort has to be done on a bigger scale. Because on a smaller scale, you're just like you said, if 90 some odd percent of the honeybee population has no resistance, and only 2% or even a fraction of a percent of the beekeepers are working towards resistance, there's you can't tip the scale. You know what I mean? Maybe
Right.
you could, but all these things are very real things to think about.
Yes, and you talked about Stephen Martin in Cuba. What is it that they keep documenting in Cuba after they had no miticides for a long time? Long time. Uncap, recap. What is
Yep.
uncap, recap directly associated with?
SMR.
SMR,
Yeah.
VSH. So
Yeah.
it's like we're not genetically engineering here. We're not using the wisdom of man to plug genes from a beaver into a freaking honeybee or whatever. We're
Yeah.
taking genes that are already in a honeybee. Maybe we're latent or whatever, but are active now. And now we're selecting for that what Mother Nature already had in there and is already revealing in other populations. We're just taking the wisdom of Mother Nature and what she's done, and then tying artificial insemination and some advanced breeding techniques to accelerate natural selection, basically.
Yeah.
But we're also we want them to be productive. We
Yep.
want them to be able to pollinate our food crops. It's kind of important. I like to eat. I know you do too.
Yep.
And we want to be able to make a living, make honey, make splits, whatever. So the bees need to be productive. And I think that's something that a lot of people forget. They'll get overly focused on one thing and then kind of forget the rest. But I think ours is almost an inverted approach to what a lot of people have done historically, we're just picking what does the best. That's the most productive and testing out of that. We're
Yeah,
not testing everything and then finding what may have these genes. And plus, I've already got them concentrated. You've already got levels of it because you've sent me a breeder stock that you had used in the past, and I let it set,
mhm,
late summer, didn't put anything on it, let it set over the season, and I'm still having measurable levels of VSH in it. And we can take it to the next level. Because I
yeah,
think that's the problem with just open mating and not selecting, is that the it automatically wants to kind of water down. But if you start with something that's concentrated, it has the opposite effect, because whenever
yeah,
all of those queens are sending these drones out, they're basically a recombinated set of what we'd already selected, and so you can really fix it in that population. Well,
yeah,
James was telling me the other day, if I understand him correctly, and he may jump on YouTube and say that's exactly not what I said, Cory, but if I understood correctly, he had run my bees in a yard for a couple years, but had moved them all out and had brought other bees in and open mated there, and was seeing uncap, recap,
yeah,
and
yeah,
traits because he ran them there, virgin queens that I'd sent up, I'm sure. And they were sending all these drones out, which stick in the local population.
yep, yep.
And then if you just keep selecting it, nobody selects it, but that's what we're going to do, is a selection on a commercial scale. Man, buckle up. That we can
Yeah,
actually
no, it's
go.
exciting. Because what, again, another thing that I like about this is I don't really have time. There's certain things that you can do well, and there's certain things that I can do well, but together, if we can really kind of cover a lot more territory in a sense, like what you just mentioned, I
Yep,
don't, I don't have as much time to select like you would.
totally.
In particular to Harbo, like I say, it's like I do them, but
I'm telling you.
I wish I could do them on like another 50 more colonies.
Yep,
And I just don't have the time or the manpower to do that right now. So if
that's
I can just
normal.
say, Cory, here's the ones that are elite, here's the ones I've vetted, I can, here's the scores on a Harbo essay that I can just pass along to you. And actually, here's some stock that looks good, but you can Harbo that, I'm gonna
Yep,
send it to you, you can run it, but so it's nice this week to have that network of collaborating on, again, same ideals for selection are there, but we can lean on each other to kind of to share the load, to share the work,
totally.
in a
Well,
way.
it makes me think of Chris, because Chris Werner is going to be producing open mated queens. Same concept that we're working here, but he's running
Mhm.
the lighter colored strain. Um, it's the exact same concept. He bought some UBO or something. He's like, I haven't even used it. He's like, really, Cory? We do what we do. We're commercial beekeepers. We're good at that. You're good at what you do. Why don't you do that? You do the selection, we do what we do, and then we make it work here to where, we're both not fish out of water. Chris isn't having to do, microscope work or stuff he doesn't have time for.
Yeah,
And then that's my game. And if this works the way I think it will, once we monetize it, I'd love to just have a team that could show up at Troy's and Troy be like, I put a flag or a pin on all my favorites.
yeah,
Do your thing.
yeah,
I don't have time to be pulling brood frames and doing all that, but you're good at making queens, you're good at making splits, you're good at making honey. I think that I really think this is gonna take foot and move,
mm,
honestly. And like you said earlier, it is a grassroots. That's exactly what it is. It's a grassroots, industry driven breeding initiative.
yeah,
And I don't think there's anything better than beekeepers learning from scientists. Same thing. Scientists aren't commercial beekeepers. That's not the way they work. They're
mhm,
good at finding out certain things. It's like, hey, this is awesome, this is useful. And then really, I think it's a failure on the beekeeping community not to have a few guys adopt this and then plug it in, and then the beekeeping community go forth and fix its own problems,
mm.
which that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, no, and I'm all, and I'm not, I don't mean to be the pessimist, but they, I think sometimes, because you think about, there's people that might watch this like, oh yeah, there's been these initiatives for a long time, and you
Yeah.
can think of some of the ones, I can't think of one right now, but I know there's a handful.
I've been in a couple.
Yeah, and I know that, for a long time, there was an initiative, Michael Palmer kind of kind of presented this idea, I don't know, in the 2010, 2008, sometime, a while ago, to get like a northeastern New England kind of queen rearing initiative thing going. And these things just never really take off, is because it takes a group of people to do it. And then how do you kind of herd the cats, so to speak?
Totally.
How do you keep
Absolutely.
everybody moving forward and keep everybody excited, and maybe have a meeting once a year? I think the real initiatives that seem to be successful right now are the Russian Bee Breeders Association. Is
Yep.
still, that they're still a group of breeders or beekeepers with an idea of maintaining the Russian stock or the Russian lines and the Russian traits in their bees. Uh, then outside of that, there might be some stuff, but I'd like to see that this would have some longevity to it. And
Agreed.
I think it just, like you mentioned, the thing that I feel personally, where I can feel like, yeah, I can be involved for long, like I can see myself doing this for a long time, is just being able to collaborate with someone like you,
Mhm.
and other guys that are going to be part of it or whoever, it's because we don't, again, we haven't really kind of hammered out details on, like, who's going to
Yep.
get who can join, who can, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think having it at a size that is easily managed, and where you're not kind of inundated with everybody from all over the place.
Yep.
Um, but that's by just being that, it's already kind of organically happening, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to be like, all right, we got to do this. We got contracts, or we're obligated, or there's even some coercion or something. But it's just like we both have the same passion and desire,
Mhm.
uh, and I can't help to think that that will kind of grease the wheels for longevity, for
I do
seeing this.
too. Absolutely. And I've been a part of a few breeding groups too. And like the theory was good, but it didn't make traction. So
Right.
here, let me see if I can pick this apart because I haven't really thought about articulating this. But like, Dr. Harbo's group, with him, everybody's supposed to be testing,
Hmm.
and then you're supposed to send stock to somebody else. So there's a big circle, and it's a circle of maybe 20 people, and everybody is just passing what they have to the left. So to
Yeah.
me, you're going round and round and round and round, but you're not going forward per
Hmm.
se. And maybe you are in a roundabout way, but then it gets to be cat herding, and there's different personalities, and some people don't jive, and some people step on other people's toes. It just didn't feel like it was gaining as much traction. But if we can keep it a small group, and you know, if we don't get along or I don't get along with somebody, obviously I'm not going to ask that person to be
Yeah.
in. And I think it needs to be really small first, until we get everything ironed out. And then I think it is scalable, but until like it starts to gain traction, basically money starts flowing in from sales. Um, it's going to be hard to make it even larger because you're just spreading yourself too thin, and then
Yeah.
you die anyway. And
And I
like
think,
Adam, go ahead.
no, you just mentioned the whole key to this thing is that, show me the money.
Yeah, it's
I'm going to
got to.
buy a queen from somebody that's a part of this initiative. I'm going to buy a queen from Cory. I'm going to buy a queen from Troy. I want to be able to, take that queen. And I say this like, okay, you're going to buy, I don't know how to word this. Some people say I'm going to buy one queen, and I better see some results. I'd say give
Yeah,
give it a little bit more than a single queen.
yeah,
If you really you
on
want
a
to
bat.
vet somebody's stock, buy like a half a dozen or a dozen queens from somebody. Then
Yeah,
you get a good representation. But if you're just buying single, solitary one queen bee, then I don't think it's hope, I'd like to think that yes, you could see and you should see some results. But if you
that's,
were to really buy the queens, they do, you see an improvement.
yep,
That is what's going to keep this whole thing going too, right? Because if
right.
it is just this round and around, 20, like I'm just looking at, like, for example, VSH, has been around for a while, since the early 2000s, right? Really where it was
Mhm.
marketed to the industry. And VSH has made a big impact to you and me as beekeepers, but not everybody. It hasn't taken the industry and revolutionized the industry. So how we would define progress, is it's a hard thing because I could a rabbit trail. It's like if you're a speaker and you define success merely by the number of people showing up at your engagements for speaking, is that successful?
Yeah,
Or is successful, you're a speaker, right? You're an orator, you're orating, people want to come and hear what you have to say. So maybe you could say, not the other way to measure success is how many people are you impacting in your presentations? Not everybody, you can get the numbers, but out of those numbers, is there real change happening? Like, are you impacting somebody individually and that individual adds up to a crowd and the ideology, expands out of that? Does that make sense? So
absolutely.
there's like the surface measurement, and then there's the real like meat and potatoes, which I think comes with time and
Mhm.
which comes with real just vigilance to an integrity and just time, like to measure real hard stuff that's got to happen. So rabbit trail, but that's one thing I see, like, that these queens in time we should like not be fooled by the fact that, okay, we have an initiative and we're just doing this because we like doing it, but we don't care about the impact anymore. We just like doing it. And
Yeah,
people are buying our queens for the most part. I like to think that show me the money is like, we're buying your queens and we want them because they are actually doing what you propose them, what they should be doing.
correct. And the thing is like what we're doing to measure these is public knowledge now.
Yep.
It wasn't the case before around 2020, actually. It's not that long ago.
Yeah.
But now people can buy these queens. They can let them sit. They can wait till they're starting to squirm like we are right now because the pressure of mites and everything is so high right now. Go measure it yourself. Don't take
Yep.
my word for it. Go put a measuring stick to it yourself. So this
Yep.
is different. So you can actually measure it. It's not like, well, I think they did okay. We can put a measuring stick to it now. That's a total game changer. And the thing is, too, is like I don't think it's perfect right now. I may never think it's perfect. I'm probably never going to be satisfied with it. But I think that if we keep continuous improvement in mind, like what it is now and what it is in 3 years and what it is in 5 years is not going to be the same.
Yep.
It's going to be different and it's going to be good or better. I won't even say the best, but it'll be better. But we're
Mm.
starting with good proven stock anyway. So it's not like we're just taking a shot in the dark here. It's the main thing is we're going to keep it productive, keep it useful, and then keep tightening up that mite resistance to where it's just fixed in there. Um,
Yep.
Hopefully uniformly, but it's always a balance. You can get uniformity, but then you sacrifice genetic diversity. I
Yep.
want my cake and eat it too. I want uniformity, but I want that high genetic diversity. And if anybody knows bee breeding, that doesn't happen overnight.
No, and I think what's beautiful about SMR or BSH, this type of, trait that we're looking for, is that it encompasses, and this is why I kind of been bought out on this too, because I firmly am a believer of, kind of like uh, what's the word I'm going to look for? It's like horizontal breeding in a way. I don't, it's not even probably an actual term, but you want as much of the selection pressures involved in the process instead of just really fine tuning and like dialing it into just one specific trait. And where this trait, as you know, because I'm preaching to the choir with you, Cory, but for the sake of the audience, it's like this is a complex trait set. It's not just a particular behavior. It's incorporating a multitude of behaviors and things happening on the individual honeybee level and colony level. It's a complex trait that I think requires it's complex, but that's the way it ought to be.
Yeah.
I don't know, you can elaborate more, I think, with better articulation than I did, but
I think you nailed it there because it is a set of genetically based behaviors, which is kind of a bizarre thing to think about.
mhm,
And they may have a genetic advantage on being able to detect or smell certain things, so it may be a certain type of pheromones that they're able to smell that other bees are oblivious to. Like if
mhm,
you look at most bees, if you go in and SMR testing, they're not suppressing any mite reproduction, period. The
yeah,
only mites that aren't reproducing are the 16 or so percent that are naturally sterile for
yeah,
whatever reason. They just can't have babies. But what we're talking about is 50, 75, 85, 100% where they're not allowing any mites to reproduce. And I see it quite frequently, which was cool. I'm always a skeptic too, Troy. I don't go tell people I have everything figured out, everything's great, there's no work left to do. But I've also seen what's possible. And Stephen Martin, we were talking about SMR, VSH, and he's like, we are talking about fours, which a
Yep.
four on the Harbo scale is 100% suppressed mite reproduction. He's like, Cory, they're rare. They're out there, but they're rare. I'm like thinking to myself, man, they're not rare at my apiary. But I didn't want to say, well, and make some statement. I just sit and stew on it. But I'm like, that's pretty cool in itself because my bees, our bees probably are freaks of nature. They've been selected.
Yeah.
They've
Well,
had natural selection, and we're
you've
now
nurtured
using
it.
AI.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
You've done the hard work to build what you have in your apiary and to
Yep.
nurture and maintain that. And now how do we take that from what you're doing, what I'm doing? And this is my biggest thing is like, how do you take that small percentage that normally would survive on its own anyways, but it's not possible to just take small percentages. And you can't do this. You can't be in farming. I'm speaking on a commercial kind of scale. You can't be commercial economically viable with small percentages, that
Right.
survive, right?
And
So
then,
how do you take the small and expound that, or expel that into a bigger population that is going from this to this to this. So
but I
yeah,
think
no,
we're close already. Like I was
yeah,
saying, fours aren't rare in my apiary. So we took that what was a 2%. Well, now it's like a possibly the majority of the population. So all we got to keep doing is just the selection work. So we're
yeah,
already way above a really low percentage. I think we can keep the genetic diversity and make it may not be 100%, but high 90s, to where you
mhm,
have that, if we send you these bees, you let the mite load grow and you do a little SMR measurement on them, you're going to get measurable results. And a
mhm,
lot of people, even like I ship virgins, which is kind of a weird thing, but it allowed me to get out of my day job. It was actually profitable to produce queens then.
yep,
But that's a whole separate argument and a difficult topic altogether. It's not the industry solution. But I've sold stuff to people that tested an F1, so that open mated to who knows what. Well,
yep,
that had a high level of VSH, which isn't a surprise because John Harbo and company had a paper out that basically said the same thing. If you have a highly selected maternal and paternal line, if you open mate it to a random XYZ bees, that colony still has a high level of resistance. But a lot of people are seeing it in F2s and F3s even. So if we keep that selection pressure on it and they bought in, they can see it, and they're buying queens and supporting it financially because the money has to be there or it
yep,
just won't fly. It's like
yep,
a grant, they'll do something great for 2 years and then the money's gone. So they
yep,
just, we're not interested in that. So basically, with our concept that we're outlining here, there's going to be a little bit of an upcharge, whatever that is. Again, Troy and I haven't worked out all the details, but we're trying to make it mutually beneficial for the producer to make a
yep,
little bit more money, not just me. And then I get some money out of the program from Queen Sales too to actually make this go to where we can hire techs. Like I said, I would really like in 3 years to 5 years to have a team of people that would just fly in and test your stuff
I would
and
say have
collect
at it.
semen. You can collect semen while you're there. That one, that one, that one, that one. Those are the ones we want.
Yep,
Collect a few tubes, fly home. We could make the breeders here, or we could make the breeders on site. If you had virgin queens available, you could make the next year's breeders, bang, 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 and then we'll see you next year. Hopefully
yeah,
before then, because we want to hang out and do fun stuff, not just work
yeah,
all the time. So,
yeah,
but I think the concept could work. Again, Depends on how good we do. If we do really good and you see it in the queens, it's worth it to you. You guys keep buying more queens, then the program can expand. And again, it's like we articulated, it is just a grassroots industry driven initiative.
Yep.
And we're going to see where it goes.
Yes. We're just looking at some of the things that we could cover here. What else we could. Oh, we mentioned like as far as like BSH and SM, like a Harbo SA, and then like you what like with UBO,
Yep.
why are we I guess what do we what do we feel about, or I guess what yeah what are we gonna, what's the spiel there with what do we want to do with, or why we lean on more of like a VS, like a Harbo SA, more so than just like a UBO.
Well, the first thing comes to mind, like UBO is a new hygiene, specific hygiene test. And I do think there's overlap with it in VSH populations. So, like if you go into a bunch of bees and you test them, if you're getting results, there's some level of VSH in there. I would put money on it. Ian Stepler said the same thing. He said they did a bunch of UBO testing up there, and the only ones that paid any attention to it were VSH lines.
Yep.
So, you know, take that for what it's worth. But here's the thing why I lean on SMR or VSH testing. So, we're talking about VSH Varroa sensitive hygiene. So the worker bee smells, there's a cap over this pupa. The worker bee detects something's going on in there. So they uncap, recap. We talked about that.
Mhm.
They uncap it. Yes, something's going on in there. We pull the pupae out and throw it outside. It's infested with Varroa or it's diseased. Okay, perfect. Whenever we're doing an SMR test, it's capturing that.
Yeah.
However, there's new data that came out, and I would probably have to hit James. I don't want to misspeak and name the wrong scientist, but there was a study done that basically said void of hygiene.
Mm.
Like they wouldn't let the worker bees open it up and throw stuff out. So they
Yeah.
like kept them away from it. And there were still measurable SMR in the
Mm.
brood. So we
Yep.
call that the brood effect, whatever that may be. And I have a theory on that. Here's my theory on it. Okay, so a mosquito, in order to lay eggs, she has to bite Troy, suck some of his blood out, and have a blood meal. Then she can ovulate. A
Mhm.
tick has to bite Troy, or maybe, the family dog. Somebody has to, there's got to be blood. They
Yep.
have to eat and have that blood meal in order to ovulate. So I think my personal theory is that the brood, oh, and basically a varroa mite is the same family as a tick, basically. It has to feed on the brood and have a blood meal or a hemolymph or fat body in order to ovulate. So
Hmm.
I speculate that those bees that have a brood effect basically are denying or giving a low level of a specific protein to where she can't
Yeah.
ovulate quick enough. So again, somebody a lot smarter than me is going to have to test that theory, but I think common sense wise and knowing bugs, it makes sense. There's other
Yeah,
species.
no, it's a brilliant, I mean, it just adds up really nicely.
It makes sense. And so
Yep.
my point of that long drawn out and boring story, Troy, was that if we use the SMR test, it
It's
captures hygiene and it's going to capture brood effect.
Yeah, and that's again, that goes back to where we just mentioned how this is the again where the Harbo essay so far is encompassing, it's encompassing this complex system, this complex behavior uh that's happening for bees, dealing with mites, because it just can't be this single mechanism
Yeah,
it's multiple mechanisms. It's
exactly.
complicated, it's complex.
And there may be something that we're missing by selecting that. Like Randy does alcohol washes, Randy
Mhm.
Oliver, and other people use alcohol washes or another metric to measure. There may be something we're missing. However, I've I've been a VSH hoarder and a VSH breeder for a while, and I've seen with my own eyes what they're capable of, stuff that has a high level of it. And you will not see chalk brood. You're not going to see American foul brood. You're not going to see withered wings. You're not going to see, you'll still get mites, you know, like if you've got a
Yeah.
lot of mite pressure. And that's why I don't want to use an alcohol wash as our leading metric.
Yep.
We'll stick on the SMR because I've seen stuff that started to get a mite load, but it was 100% SMR. So you
Yeah.
would do an alcohol wash, give it 15 plus mites in that wash, and it gets thrown out of the breeding pool. Whereas
Yep.
if you went into the brood, you would have figured out that
It's a
they're
black
getting
hole.
mites. Yeah, but they're coming in, but they're not leaving.
Yep. Yep.
So, at least not their babies anyway. They're not reproducing. So
Yeah. And that's what you want. You want to be able to have something that is functioning like in a comprehensive way. Like it's going to evolve with everything that's happening in the environment and with whatever, nature's throwing at bees. Like we don't want to be measuring something that's working today and that might be kind of outgrown or tossed to the side and a few years from now and it's no longer really the mechanism that's being tapped into anymore. We need something that's constantly evolving with what's, I mean, that's the whole thing with breeding is it's this complex work and it's got to be, things have to be utilized for selection that are also complex, that are measuring complex, that I guess is a way, it's kind of an oxymoron, but to measure complexity, you can't really measure it, but it has to encompass it. You have to be able to work hand in hand with those things that are happening.
right. And I think that's the beauty of that test that we're focusing on is it captures either or,
Yeah.
like both mechanisms, a brood effect, SMR brood effect, or VSH strictly hygiene. We're catching both in that metric.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be our overarching goal. And the thing is too is we're going to keep things simple. I think that a lot of the groups we talked about that didn't gain traction or didn't go where they kind of envisioned them to go, I think some of that is because maybe they had too many rules or maybe they were too rigid to where people couldn't use their own artistic expression on the bees. Like with this, I'm not even asking people not to treat.
Yeah.
Run bees like you would run bees, run the heck out of them. At least try to keep track of what's what, either be all in or know that this yard, that's the VSH ones that we're looking at. And then just show me where the stubs are. Show me
Yeah.
where the best ones are. Like Paul Landsberg, he's run my bees for years, breeders for years. And he's working on the lighter line with me too. And he runs them out to almonds, pollinates, brings them back to Missouri and he's like, there they are. I put the triple deep, just covered with
Yeah.
bees, huge colonies. He's like, there they are. Let's go see. And we used UBO this round,
Yep.
um, which he was using VSH stock. So we got some hits on that.
Mhm.
But the reason why I chose to use UBO that round is because I didn't want to interfere with anybody's treatment schedule, which is
Yep.
real difficult because with the SMR test, you really want to let that mite load build or you're not going to
Yeah.
get solid data. And
Yep.
so my thought is it doesn't matter if he just amateurized them. I can go in there and figure out who's got resistance. So more to come out on that. Like I've only used
Yep.
it a couple times.
Yeah, because
I
you,
think
you
it's
you
got
once kind of came at it, you came at it from like the backdoor effect, like you just mentioned.
Yep,
Guy needs to, you got to keep the incentive for the beekeepers to keep the mite levels down. Which is not the
totally.
incentive for measuring, SMR or measuring, doing a Harbo assay, but you can say, okay, let's UBO them. That's got to measure, that's got to encompass some sort of VSH or
Yep.
SMR traits. We'll just take whatever scores high on a UBO.
Right. And then here this next week, we're going to be doing SMR tests on the
Mm.
stuff that came back that was high UBO.
Mm.
So, but I couldn't do it right away. Paul said, I don't think Paul had treated him, but I didn't want him to alter his whole program.
Yeah.
No, it's like square peg, round hole. I don't want Cory coming in making all these mandates. You got to be a treatment-free beekeeper. You can't do this. You can't do this. You
Yeah.
can't. They're going to be like, okay, oh, you're getting fuzzy. and hang up the phone and not talk to me anymore. I
Yeah,
want it to fit and be loose enough, or not loose, flexible enough
yeah,
that I'm not mandating what foundation Troy has to run, or whether he has a screen or solid bottom board, or what. Just run the heck out of them. You're a beekeeper, you know these colonies here have got potential, whatever it
yeah,
is, and then we can test those, and then we'll concentrate them. We'll use those as drone sources to inseminate the next round, and then we rinse and repeat. And
yep,
so it'll be a continuous improvement. And I think it's like sighting a rifle in. Some people may have never shot a gun listening to this, but if you're sighting a rifle in, or you're trying out new ammunition, typically it's, and then you're the goal is to bring that consistency or that shot group in to where this is where we're getting 90 some odd percent that are
mm,
extremely high VSH on open mated production queens. That's the
yep,
goal. And if we can get that ironed out and then get some good producers like yourself on board, again, we don't want to grow this too fast because it'll just get out of hand.
yep,
Once we're plugged in to the commercial supply, people complain about packages or Georgia, Queens, or whatever. It has nothing to do with the fact that they came out of Georgia. It's just that
mhm,
they've never been selected for any kind of host resistance. So imagine if you had packages coming out of Florida or Georgia or wherever with VSH queens in them, going all over the nation.
yeah,
Checkmate. That's
yeah,
whenever the scales have tipped, in
yep,
our favor. But until then, this
yeah.
is
It'll,
this
it that's the objective. That's the ideal. Yeah, that's
right.
what
That's
we're
the
looking to.
ideal. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's doable. And if people start, again, people can measure it now. It's not
yep,
snake oil. We sell you these queens, measure them. That's what I tell people. There's going to be some variation in them, but measure it.
yeah,
And oftentimes they're pleasantly surprised. There was one guy I talked to whenever I taught that Penn State insemination course. He's like, I bought queens from you last year. They did good. I didn't treat them, but I checked one in particular had 20 mites in the wash. I was like, okay. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, do a harbo on them.
mhm,
He pulled 200 pupa, no
nothing.
reproductives. So they're bringing
That's
mites in, but they're not letting them reproduce. They're not
yeah,
they're not they're not perpetuating the problem. But
yeah,
obviously, you got big mite pressure coming in, which is again why I don't like using an alcohol wash as a breeding selection.
yeah. And what that scenario you just described, I think is one of the growing pains. I don't have it's really I don't sometimes words just don't come to me to articulate these things, but that is that's like the number one impulse to say we have to do something about the mites, right? Because we're just, and I think there's a place for washes, right? There's a place for alcohol
Totally,
washes, but
absolutely.
sometimes I wonder what is that place? Because if all we're looking at right now is just that there's a small population of bees in the managed population, there's a small population in the managed population that has actually got resistance, and we're constantly having neighbor beehives. We have neighbors, right? Beehive neighbors, or areas where you have these mites drifting, and kind of like you said, the consistency is a little bit irregular.
Yeah,
Then you're gonna see like this like for me, you see it this time of year, like you said, you get robbing, colonies collapsing, whatever might be happening, and mites are moving around, kind of, and they're drifting. Even inside the colony, they could be moving from drones to workers, and then from colonies to other colonies. But regardless, it's this complex thing that's playing out. And then when you start to get 20 mites in a 300 bee sample, what are you going to do with that?
yeah,
Does that mean you have to treat them? Um, I don't know how to, like, everyone has to make those decisions for themselves, but and that's what I kind of at the beginning of our conversation, when I say, like, when I go into a beehive right now, for me, what do they look like? And I know this is really kind of loosey goosey, like it doesn't matter what they look like. If they have 20 mites out of 300 bees, they're dead bees walking. Some people would, rightfully, that's a rightful argument to say, but if you harboed them, or I like, for me, if you don't have time to harbor, it's like, well, give them a chance.
mm,
And obviously you're giving them a chance, but you're risking, it's a risk for me to give them the chance, because now
right.
it's like, are they going to be alive next year? Am I giving them a chance just to lose them and to come out, one colony down? So that's that complex kind of nature. That's almost like the opposite like the solution that we're trying to aim for, right? That the industry is geared towards, we need to have one mite, in the spring. If you're doing a wash, one mite in your wash is unacceptable in the spring.
Yeah.
This whole idea that zero mites in a beehive is like is what we strive for. It's like, that's not, I think that's part of the learning curve, that's not realistic. That's not a realistic kind of way to look at how mites and bees are going to play out into the future. What do you think, Cory?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's complex, like if you're looking at a 1% infestation on a high VSH colony, that's different than looking at a 1% infestation on a non-VSH colony, because a high VSH colony, your mite level, unless they're bringing them home from robbing, isn't going to do this. It's just going to maybe slightly go up late summer and then drop, unless they're just getting inundated with the neighborhood. And also, like, what's your end goal? Are you breeding?
Yeah.
Or are you just trying to have alive bees? That's two totally different things. If I wasn't a breeder, I don't think I would be treatment free, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, no, I'm right. Yeah.
You know what? The risk, I'm causing more problems than I'm fixing potentially, or I'm putting myself and my livelihood at too much risk. And I'm not even trying to produce a line of bees anyway. Maybe I should just clean them up. That's probably the common sense view. But my goal is I'm trying to see who has it and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And some people do a little bit of both. Some people want to develop their own line and can do both. It's just a ton of work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think where the alcohol wash has its place is it is the best metric we are currently aware of to measure load.
Yep.
So, like, whenever load is irrelevant to me, because I want to know SMR. Load is all over the place. Like, from year to year, from colony to colony, it's all over the board.
Oh yeah.
So load is irrelevant. But if I'm coming in as a producer and I want my bees to be alive in the spring, man, I don't even know that I would do a lot of washes. I might sample a little bit, but I'm gonna nuke them probably. I'm gonna clean them up. And that's what most people are doing. And I think here's what it boils down to. It's the rub or the tension or the strain is short-term solutions, long-term solutions. Bang, 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 just constantly. Like,
yeah. That's a great way to articulate it.
It's never going to go away, because what's your end goal? Are you a honey producer or are you a breeder? That's two different things. And then, you add the other factor. Do I want a short term? I'm not trying to breed a bee. I just need to clean these things up. Or am I looking, I'm stuck in the long-term view, like, all the time. It's probably a fault of mine, but like, it pays off long term. You're just going to suffer for a long
time. Yeah.
So
no, it's a great. I'm always thinking about that conflict. Like, I battle with it internally every year within myself and my own little operation here, and then I think about the industry at large, and I think about how is that gonna, if you gave somebody a mite resistant bee, you let's say for all intents and purposes, for the hypothetical conversation, this is like, you give them a resistant bee or a resistant colony. And obviously it's hypothetical, but let's just say somehow, with the environment or whatever, they inherited some mites from something. And you got that above, the 3%, threshold or whatever. You did a wash and it was above the economic threshold, right? Would you be willing to would you be willing to take a leap of faith and let those bees play it out, because that's the whole, for me, my logical play into when I play it out to the end, my idea is like, that's what we'd like, is to get to that point where you don't need to use the treatment, because you can see it, that you have enough experience, exposure, to what the bees are doing, to know that you can kind of get to these places where, things look a little crazy, but they will hopefully clean themselves up. Again, I'm not doing a good job of articulating this hypothetical thing, but I'd like to think that the instant kind of gut reaction of like, oh no, high mite load means treat. Like, would that change in a few years because of, maybe if we see more resistance in the population where high mite load, okay, don't worry about it so much. Let's, things kind of like, it'll kind of work itself out. Or I don't know, does that make sense, Corey? With what I'm trying to get at?
Absolutely. My mind was going where you said, which I think you were dead on, even a little bit further. It's like,
It's almost like the psychology of the bee industry, right? It's
yeah,
like, maybe this isn't the right conversation to have it now, but it's like will
uh,
the psychology around treatment change if people are exposed to what, really good, like a good breeding program that's hopefully going to be able to push resistance into a population. If you can start to establish that, will the psychology around treatment change?
it
I don't
will. It will, but it's based in fear right now, and fear is a powerful emotion. So until
know. Yeah, you gotta shut the outside door, please. Sorry, Troy.
no
Yeah,
worries.
no, you're saying fear, but fear rightfully placed though, right? I'm gonna
Right.
play the devil, because
Exactly.
otherwise, there's a lot of people that'd be out of business.
Totally. Big time and quickly. Now, here's
Yeah,
the thing. I think where it'll change is I always say I'm from the show me state. I am
yeah.
literally, I'm from the show me state. I have to see it. Well, I've seen it. Now I did that from the safety of a day job. I didn't do that from the risk of all my livelihood is put on this. So I did this for what, 16 years, and then I quit my day job. So like I've been treatment free and I'm not saying people should be treatment free. I'm just saying I've not used
Likewise. Yeah.
anything for 13 plus years. So I know what a bad year looks like and I know what a good year looks like. I can accept that risk now, and
Mhm.
be comfortable with it. But I have an unfair advantage because I'm running a VSH breeding program. It's completely different. And I
Yeah.
think that once people see it with their own eyes or have their buddies see it, how much better they look, and it's still a tool in the tool shed. We're saying
Mhm.
mite resistant bees, not mite proof bees.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think once people see it, if the industry would adopt it, I don't think that. I mean, I think it's checkmate then because all your pharaoh populations are interbreeding with these. And even if you're just using F1s or virgins or cells, you are inundating your local environment with VSH drones, even from cells. Doesn't matter what they're mating with.
Yeah.
And if we can get into that, the problem is why do those high VSH bees get a mite load? Because somebody else is not resistant right over there.
Yeah.
Whereas if we were inundating all of our apiaries and our areas with VSH drones, that's not a problem anymore because
Mhm.
it's so interbred with VSH that mite bombs aren't everywhere around every corner like they
Yeah.
are now. And
And
it has to
because
be
like,
adopted by the commercial industry or it's not, we're not going to achieve that.
yeah, and I mean, we're speaking of things we don't even really know much about too, like, right? Like, if as you start to play into like how things evolve, how organisms evolve, like, who knows what what's going to look like, are mite bombs going to be an issue, and what will how will mites drift from one hive to the next in a population of bees that have more mechanisms to deal with them, right? It's like
Totally.
we just don't know how this it's just like, we just don't know how that's going to look, but I'd
Yeah.
like to think that it's going to look better than what it does today, right?
Oh, totally. Well,
Yeah,
like Kara was saying, what is it? 2 to 4% of the colonies have resistance. Well, what if it was 50?
yeah.
What if it was 60? What if it was 75? That's why I'm
Mhm.
saying you're going to hit that. It's goes with like James talking about moving all of his VSH bees out of a yard and then mating random bees to whatever was still there, feral. Well, they
Mhm.
started uncapping. Same thing. I mean, you can stick it in a population, and if commercial sources adopt this, they see that it's worthwhile and they're starting to use it, then it's game on. Just
Yeah,
because that until you win over the majority of queen sales that go to hobbyists, commercials, or anybody under the sun, until you flip that scale or put the weight in your favor instead of against you, we're
yeah,
kind of fighting an uphill battle. But I mean, it is achievable. All you've got to do is breed something that's actually mite resistant and that people can see it and use it. Of course, they're going to want it.
yeah.
Again, nobody loves treating their colonies is a pain in the butt, you know, and nobody loves doing alcohol washes. They suck. It takes time, time that you could be doing other things, you know,
Yep.
stuff that your wife wants you to do.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So it's tricky, but I and I'm a skeptic about a lot of stuff too. I just think that once it's out there and it's productive, because I think a couple problems that VSH had in the past is VSH 1.0, like, oh, we found this. And
Yep.
they were doing single drone inseminations. It was probably inbred, basically. It
Mhm.
probably wasn't productive, but it was mite resistant. Well, people are like, we don't want that. You know, they
Yep.
lost faith in it a little too quick because it was version 1.0. The industry didn't really dive in and start selecting and propagating this stock. That was the
Mhm.
problem. You know, so I think if we can overcome that, we're not
Yep.
using VSH 1.0 anymore. We're using productive stuff that has high levels of VSH. That's a different ball game. So,
Yep.
and people were selling crap as VSH that was 0% VSH. That's the number one way to kill something, is for people to just knock it off and, yeah, it's
Yep.
VSH, wink, wink, selling it to somebody that there's no way they would know anyway. Well,
Yep.
now we can measure it. So if you're selling crap that's not VSH, your time is limited, pal, because the word's gotten out that, you know, I don't have to have a PhD or a lab coat to measure this stuff. And so there's a ton of people that are actually doing it. And again, big thanks to the Sustainable Beekeepers group up there.
Yeah.
James and them, they've made videos, they've made a little course you could take, like they're chattering about it. And
Yeah. No,
people
they've,
were
yeah.
skeptics. Like Matt was a skeptic when he came down, Matthew Kobe, and now
Yep.
he's seeing it. And so it's just a matter of people seeing it, and it'll catch
Yep.
on. But hopefully by that time, we've got such a killer strain of SMR black bee that we're like the
Oh, that
next.
I, I, just like, just where I'm sitting today, it's like, I'm looking forward. It'd be not, I'm looking forward to personally seeing what I have improve because of doing something like this, because of collaborating.
Mhm.
Again, I live in a bubble. I don't really bring in a lot of stock from too many people. And when I do, it's really got to be something that I like, someone who I trust, who it's got to be something, it's not done readily. I don't, I spent too much time and energy building up what I have. And I'm not saying what I have is anything special, but I personally just put too much effort into it to just kind of entrust this to something else, to somebody else's, judgment, measure, and selection.
I think you
So,
special, Troy. I do.
what's
I
that?
I think you have something special because you took a load less traveled and risky for a long time, and that produced something that, and maybe you couldn't see it right away. I know you didn't know how to do VSH measurements. I didn't either, you know, a few years back, but I've measured some of your stock and I've wintered it here, and it's good.
Yeah.
Like, and it's more gentle than the stuff I've got. Some of it, you know, mine's like, again, it's always a work in progress, but man, yours were just cool as a cucumber, dark bees, beautiful, white, dry cap honey whenever they put it up. A pleasure to work.
Mhm.
Totally different than what I was
Yeah.
working with, but desirable and useful. And it's already got some level of VSH. So you're talking about tying that in with insemination.
Yeah.
Oh, now we can measure it. Now we have
Yeah.
for the mating. It's already good. That's why I'm saying we're not starting with trash.
Yeah.
Starting off, we've got really
Yeah.
good stuff, but we can even make it even better and more consistent.
Yeah.
So it's going to be good. Yeah, I know you're just being humble, but I wanted to interject with that because I've seen it myself.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Corey. Again, I just, every beekeeper someone like you, if you can get out and take a look, at multiple apiaries of different people, different breeders, and you can kind of compare and contrast. But I personally live in this little bubble all season long. So I just play with my bees
But
and
that's
it's
a
all I know.
positive thing.
Yeah. And then, I'm excited to see how where I can start to see an improvement based upon what I've already been doing, but I can see the improvement. I can see it take the next level.
Yeah.
hit, reach the next level of like, wow, I'm seeing things play out that I normal that I'm seeing a change for the better, seeing a
Totally.
positive correlation. Yeah.
We will, absolutely. And the thing is too, is like you were talking about living in a bubble. Until I could measure VSH, that's why I said I was a VSH.
Yeah.
I would just hoard it. They weren't the same.
Yeah.
They weren't. Like Mother Nature just kicked the crap out of some of it that was sold as VSH. And so I don't think it was that VSH. I don't think,
Yeah.
but I could measure it. Now we can. It's totally different right now. And so, and I was going to say too, like, whenever I think I lacked confidence as a breeder, like I knew how to do insemination, I knew what a good bee looked like, but I couldn't measure VSH. I didn't know how. And so the
Yep.
grass was always greener on the other side. And you said, like, people you trust. I even trusted these people. I still do.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I brought in actually degraded what I already had
Mm.
some ways. Like maybe I would gain something, but I would lose something else. So, as a breeder, as somebody who's selecting, I think you should be cautious about what you're bringing in. And like, I
Oh
don't think
yeah.
I'm going to anything else in until I have inbreeding. And the way our model is set up, Page Laidlaw closed population breeding model variant, I'm using a variation of it.
Yep. Yep.
Inbreeding is a long way off. You
Yep.
really got to do some SDIs or some major single drone inseminations, some major narrowing of alleles to really
Yep.
get inbreeding. I think most people, if you're open mating, don't worry about it.
Oh yeah, that's what I always tell people. If you're open mating queens,
Yeah,
you could probably go your whole career with using one or two breeders. I'm talking about big operations, tens of thousands of queens.
especially
Using
if you
sing.
change it every year, a couple years,
Yep.
out of a new open mated, like you just threw a bunch of diversity back in there. So
Yep.
worry about it, but I don't think they need to really. But most people don't want to do this, Troy. That's the thing. Selection sucks. Breeding
It's a
is
lot
not,
of work.
it's a lot of work. Typically, you don't make any money. Like there was one book I read, I wish I could go back and find that quote, but it basically said there is no monetary incentive to breed a better bee.
No,
And they're
no.
right. I hate to say it, but he was dead on. But
Yeah.
if I feel like if I focus on what I do well, you focus on what you do well, we meet in the middle, we can make this work. There'll have
Yep.
to be a little bit of an upcharge compared to the normal queen to like keep the program running to where we can hire people, because this is industry.
Yes.
We're not getting grants to where we can just blow this money. But you know what? We're going to be here a few years
Yeah.
down because I think it'll just keep rolling once everybody sees how it works and sees
Yep.
what at the other end too. So
So for folks that are, hold on one sec, Corey.
yeah,
About 20 minutes. 15. So if for folks that are interested in what we're doing, I guess I'm pretty sure between you and I collaborating together and with a few other folks that you're working with too, we can kind of keep people abreast, I might be speaking out of turn here, but I kind of envision something for me personally, if people are interested, like next season, I'd like to be in a position where I could start to say, yep, I have some queens that are kind of come through this process, from this
yep,
initiative, where I could start to say like, I have, this is that they're here. I can, put the stamp on them and say, let's move some queens on to some customers.
absolutely. And the thing is too that I think we got to sort out because what did you get this round? Was it my stuff mixed with some?
Yeah, yeah, it was the yellow ones.
Okay, so you'll God willing, those are still alive. You could have some out of that. That's more
Yeah.
the very hunter, like a yellow line. But I think we should have breeders on the ground pretty quick for
Mhm.
next year. So I think you should have something right out of the gates.
And I'm
And
not trying to put pressure on you, right? Because who knows what
no,
next spring's gonna look like.
I need to be pressured. It's
Yeah.
honestly, I thrive under pressure. I do better that way. So Yep, I would say if you're interested in this, you're interested in this SMR breeding initiative, you want some of these production queens, contact Troy. If you're wanting a darker line, we're going to start working on that. He'll probably have some of the lighter bees too, maybe a little bit of both. Whatever Troy wants to do, basically, it's
Mhm.
his choice. Whatever of those, if he wants to run just one or both, contact him for queens. Um, and I'm pretty stoked about working on the darker line, I have to say. I've been
I'm
involved.
excited. I'm just excited to hand them over to you. Like what I'm essentially doing was most of the queens I'm sending to Cory are coming from they're my breeders that I use. For example, like last year or this year, a few of them that were like the cream of the crop from my breeding program that I use. And I'm saying, these queens are some of them are 3 years old.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
what
like
series.
this year all of them are 2-year-old queens, but like so they're not productive for raising big brood nests anymore. But if I can get them over to Cory here before the start of winter, and he can overwinter them, and then do like do a harbo, or if it confirm on his end, all the data's right, all the everything's there for SMR, and then he can do you can work your magic on your end
Yep,
with AI, with doing some raising some breeders and getting it back to me. That's really going to be the fun part, where I can kind of see how passing this off to Cory and then coming back, how it's, and then putting it into my own stock again, and then seeing that improvement, and knowing
totally,
that that improvement's being passed along to customers.
exactly. And two, like right now, I have to raise a bunch of like basically thousands of queens, again, mostly virgins that I'm selling in the spring to keep my lights on and pay my bills now.
Mhm.
Ideally, once this collaboration starts to work and the money is flowing, we've got queen production and things are going, really, my hope is that I don't have to raise thousands of queens to keep the lights on. I want to be at your place
Mhm.
where you're at peak in the springtime to pick and raise breeders, make a new round of breeders on site basically, and do testing at your place too. I mean, we can
Yeah,
do
no, I.
both. I want to run some here to play with and test further,
Mhm.
but really, I would like it to just show up at your place. Here's the queens we've got. They're about this age. Here's our favorite colonies. I can poke through them, do some testing on them, or maybe just concentrate it and give you most of the breeders, and I'll take a few to craft out of and tinker with, and then say, hey, try this. This is
Oh
even
yeah,
concentrated. You
I
know,
would, I would, I'm looking for the day to come, where that's a reality. That'd be wonderful, so.
we're getting there. We're working
Yeah.
on it. It's moving already, Troy. I mean, we're talking about it now, but things are already going. We're already working on it, and it's going to work. It's just a matter of just keeping going and watching it evolve. This is we're at ground zero right now.
Yeah.
We're the first floor at best.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go back to what I said at the beginning. What I really, the most that I get out of this too, like, is just working with you. And I'm not trying to, butter your biscuit or something, but I just really enjoy, having a few people in the industry that I can I like on an individual level as a person, and then just knowing that you're a solid beekeeper with similar ideology that I have.
Like,
And I want to seize the day, carpe diem, to try to make some sort of an improvement, and seeing if, and what would really be fun is to see that improvement be something that is actually going to be something maybe we can talk about in 20 or 30 years. Like,
totally.
wow, we're still doing it. So.
There's a lot of potential here, man. And this is cool that we're documenting ground zero too, so we could go back and look at it and watch it grow.
They're like, yeah, that whole thing fell apart. Yeah.
Right. That was a terrible idea.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I think it's a good idea. I think as a breeder, it's going to be good. I think it's going to be world class, to be quite honest. I think you might even go so far as to say revolutionary, because there's been
I
attempts before, but none of them really took root and none of them really changed or affected an industry. Maybe
Yeah.
some of them did to some degree, but uh, this is going to be
And in particular, coming out of like the grassroots movement in the industry. It's not coming from, and I'm not shunning or saying anything bad about, how we, on the all the great work that the universities have done, and all the and like the bee labs from the USDA, but having something coming truly out of the industry from just people that are, you know, willing to collaborate, and they have mutual interests and desires and motivations to improve something.
By beekeepers for beekeepers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a lot of potential, man. I'm pretty excited to see it
Yeah.
grow. Well, I know you've got family obligations. You probably better jet here before
Yeah.
long. And
Yeah.
the
No,
thing
it's,
is, too, I don't know how long we've been talking. How long have we been going here? I don't
I'm not sure what the
know.
time. It's been an hour, at least an hour, a little more than
Okay.
an hour.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm thinking sometimes I get praise and sometimes it's criticism for going like 3 to 4 hours. I've been called Cory Rogan. Uh,
Corey Rogan. Yeah.
right. I think we covered a lot here. I think it probably is a good time to shut this one off. If we have
Mhm.
additional stuff we want to talk about, let's just do another episode.
Okay. Yeah. No, let's do that.
That
And
sounds
it's always a pleasure chatting with you.
absolutely. So if you're interested in this, check out Troy's website, contact Troy. He's going to have queens from this starting 2025 in the spring. So contact him. Again, check out his website. Do you have a subscribe element to your website? Or
I'm not
just
sure. It's funny. I don't really do much on my website, but my website's a good way to kind of just reach me for email. You can email me directly to the website, or my email address is just troy@nhbeekeeper.com.
is that the
Um,
best way to
that's
contact
just the
you?
best way. I just send me an email and I'll get back with you. And I apologize for anyone who has been emailing me or is going to email me. This is the busiest time of year for me. All season is busy, but uh, until like maybe like end of September, early October, I'm just kind of treading water. So if I don't get right back with you, just be patient with me, please.
That's where I'm at too, Troy. Exactly. I've got a subscribe function on my website, which some people doesn't think works because I
Yeah,
send out so few emails. I don't like to spam people. But if I do interviews like this with Troy that are gold, I'll send out links to that if I've got a new blog post or anything. We've got a new update. We've got some new data coming out.
yeah,
Contact Troy, subscribe to my website, check it out, and just see what's going on and watch it progress. I think it's going to be really good.
yeah. No, and then to be able to see what, if we can, educate people about this whole thing too. Just kind of let people know that it's happening, and we're here to answer some questions, or to just kind of keep this, just to plant the seed, I guess, and plant and water the seed.
Yep, exactly. And I think I'll be up at New Hampshire Beekeepers this fall, hanging out with Troy.
Yes.
So that'll be awesome. If you want to talk to us about it,
I
we'll be there. Are you going to be at the
yeah,
Bee Expo? I figure you probably will.
I'm not sure. I was thinking I'd like to be at the Bee Expo this year, and I might have some family obligations, or I might be going west. So if I'm not at the expo, I apologize, but I'd like to be there if I can. So
I understand. Yep, I plan on being there. I was pretty sure I was going to be there anyway, but Cayman called me a couple weeks ago, and we've got something cooking. So I think I'll be doing some kind of presentation or demo there. So
mhm.
I'll be there. But anyhow, thanks everybody for listening. Stay in contact with us and keep an eye on this. I think it's going
Yeah,
to be
thank you, Corey.
stop recording.